Hey, this is Pastor Rick again for Evening with LJ or Evenings in LJ. Listen, forgive me as I move through these videos because this is all kind of new to me to look at electronics and try to talk to you as well and kind of go through the thoughts and keep them kind of straight as we discuss these topics. So just be patient with me as I learn this, and the longer I do it, hopefully the better we'll get at it. And I'm going to just trust God to use it even in all of my flaws. But anyway, we're coming to the final thought in this idea of worthy of worship. And I just kind of wanted to sum it all up and just share with you, what is the purpose of worship? What is worship accomplishing anyway? And I think it's simply a twofold purpose. Okay. Number one, worship, its purpose is to enthrone God in our hearts, our mind, and in the whole fullness of our life. That's the number one purpose of worshiping God, is to give him the glory, but at the same time, it is enthroning God in our hearts and in our life and in our minds. The second thing or purpose that I think worship accomplishes is it dethrones anything else and everything else that shouldn't be on the throne of our heart, even including myself. And so as we worship the way God intends, exclusively him and not us, it dethrones ourselves and everything else that we might see as top priorities. And he becomes our first love, our primary devotion, the object of all of our worship, service, devotion, love. I mean, anything you can think of. And I want to just mention a few things that I think worship accomplishes in our life. Genuine worship exalts God in the congregation of his people, not only in our heart personally, but once God is enthroned in our heart and we genuinely worship him from the heart and we begin to fellowship with other believers in the corporate worship setting, in the church house, we bring God with us, so to speak, and we become like Mary. Our genuine worship with God enthroned in our heart, the song service becomes more genuine and real at church. The word becomes more vibrant as we're hearing what it's saying about God and what that means to us in our life and how we can rightly relate to God, how we can love God better, all of those things. Worship exalts God in the congregation of his people. The second thing that genuine worship does is it expresses our love for, devotion to, and adoration of God, plain and simple. Thirdly, genuine worship exhibits our trust in God. It expresses our loyalty to God. It expresses our dependence on God. That's what true worship does. It exhibits those things: trust, loyalty, and dependence. Genuine worship also extols the virtues and the glories of God, lifts them up. And it evokes God's pleasure, is the last thing I would say. God is pleased with genuine, heartfelt worship. My friend, listen to me as we close out the study. Worship is not a daily ritual of religious activities. Worship is a vibrant engagement, interaction with the living God on a personal level, and in such a way that it begins to extend itself into our whole life, including the corporate engagement of God in worship at church. When believers are unified in their focus on God alone as the recipient of our worship. See, our worship isn't intended to please men. Our worship isn't intended to please us. Our worship isn't meant to draw forth the praises of men and say, my, that was a great sermon. Oh, what an awesome singer you are. It's not for any of that. It is intended solely for the honor and the glory and the pleasure of God. And so I encourage you, guard your heart diligently against complacency and familiarity in your acts of worship. And you can do that by engaging deliberately in remembrance and thanksgiving, by purposefully stirring our sense of reverence and awe and wonder before God. See, worship belongs to God alone. And so I encourage you, let's become believers who are full of extravagant, radical, infectious worship of the only true and living God. And I think when that happens, God will use that to transform us, our influence, and our world for his honor and for his glory, just like Peter and John in Acts 4, verse 13. Now, when they saw the boldness of Peter and John, the scripture says, and perceived that they were unlearned and ignorant men, they marveled. Now, what did they marvel at? They took knowledge of them that they had been with Jesus. See, worship changes us and transforms us. God changes us and transforms us as we worship him. And the world takes note. May God bless you. And may you be a light for his glory and a testimony to his wonder in a lost and desperate world.